On this episode of Lapeef, Let's Talk.
Of the world, you don't know that until you look at the data. You don't know, you have to find the data to substantiate that. I think it's a good point. But for right now, like if we're looking, you ask about reality. And right now, Black people who graduate from HBCUs do better financially. There was a study from Brookings Institute, a fairly recent one, where they studied this, and they found that students who graduated from HBCUs were more likely to be financially well off, almost double the amount of people who are well off from non-HBCUs. I think it's like 17% of our professional.
I'm gonna need to see that.
You know what? I'll put it here. I'm gonna have to put it in the I'll put it in the chat for you.
Let me tell you something. When I go where I work currently is in the south suburbs of Chicago, and it's deep south suburbs of Chicago. When I go, the high school, it's 3 of them, but the main one, the central location, looks like a college campus.
But hold
on, wait. I mean, let me do you one better, Rilla. And I made a whole video about this on my channel, probably during the pandemic, during the beginning of the pandemic, beginning of 2020. When I went to private middle and high school prior to transferring back to the public school, it was so indoctrinated in us to be able to not only compete at a larger scale, but to make sure that we advocate for, we give back to, and that we become a part of the fabric for the rest of our lives of what we went to and the places that we represented, which is one of the reasons why I asked the question, because that was just a part of the culture. I am a UAD Jesuit Cub for the rest of my life, no matter whether I want to or not. I'm always going to have a relationship. They reach out to me every year. They help me to understand the importance of playing a role in my community and the surrounding neighborhoods, which is right in the middle of Detroit, the whole 9 yards. So that's one of the reasons why I asked the question, is because competing, right, based off of the question that JR asked, he said, are HBCUs helping or hindering the transition to reality compared to privately white institutions? And I look at it not just from a college perspective, I take it back to even a high school based off of some of my experiences, right? Yeah, but when I'm looking at competition and competing, I'm looking at competition and competing on a global scale, right? The things that we interact with, because a lot of people like to just bring it back to America or North America, right? On a global scale, they are competing across the board. And so one of the things that I find the most hindering to a lot of the conversations that I have with people is that, like, somebody will walk up to me and say, oh man, I didn't know you was in such a high position at this particular company. I got somebody that looked like me and now I feel more comfortable. When in reality, capitalism don't care about what your color is. The only thing they care about is your ability to be able to produce, your ability to be able to, adjust or assimilate to whatever the culture is. So that means that you're easy to work with, the whole 9 yards. And so what I'm saying is it more of a hindrance that in a capitalistic society, HBCUs, in which I don't really know the culture of an HBCU because I've never been to one, and which is the reason why I'm asking the question, is it more of a hindrance in that you need somebody to look like you in order for you to be able to feel comfortable to compete when we're competing on a global scale as individuals?
Well, the message as I understand it, I'm sorry, real quick, Kay, real quick.
Go ahead.
The messaging that I've heard, like when I was in the A, the messaging that they get is that they're being prepared and have to go out and compete. Like they have to go out and compete harder. It's the same message that our grandmother, well, I don't know about y'all, but my grandmother gave me, like, you have to work twice as hard to get half as much, or get half as far, or whatever it was. But I understood that messaging. And the tools and the resources that they're getting, it's available. It's there. They're and a lot of them are getting there. I know Morehouse has a school of medicine now that's reputable and connected with Emory.
I got a follow-up question too.
Go ahead.
Piggybacks off of it.
Go ahead, but I know
because like, for example, one of the things that I've noticed about HBCUs, is that the culture, not necessarily the culture from the HBCUs themselves, but the perception, because perception very much can feed into the reality of how people interact with you on a regular basis, right? When you look at the Yales, you look at the Harvards, you even look at some of the biggest universities, Ohio State, University of Michigan, whatever, right? They're competing for the best students worldwide. So when we have this conversation, it's not just based off of whether or not the HBCUs themselves are preparing the students to be able to compete in the real world. Are the HBCUs competing for the best students in the world in general? Listen, the University of Michigan, they are going after the Indian students. They're going after the Asian students. The amount of tuition, right, as out of country students they are paying to these universities, and the amount of money that their parents are spending in order to send them to these universities are significant as far as plugging holes in the budget and being able to even, enable the university to do certain things when it comes to funding. There's so many different things that goes into competition when it comes to the schools themselves, even being able to compete from a sports perspective, right? My point is that competition from HBCUs, this conversation needs to be all engulfing and not just talking about these students that are going out into the workforce to be able to compete globally. It also has to be the university themselves, and are they putting out the right perception to be able to compete for the best students that ultimately represent them as alumni, which feeds back into their coffers long term, as far as those students saying that this is the place that I graduated from and this is the place I want to pour my resources back into.
I kind of want to hear from Amir and Ashley too. Go ahead, Amir. What are your thoughts about it?
Honestly, I can't really speak on this topic. I have very little knowledge about the culture. So
okay, what about you, Ashley? Are HBCUs helping or hindering the transition to reality compared to PWIs?
Well, when you ask that question, you're talking about, are they helping with the transition from college to reality? And I mean, if you look at the data, it says that they're doing very well. Now, I get what Anton is saying, like, the world, people are getting students from all over the world. Now, are they competing with students from all over the world? You don't know that until you look at the data. You don't know. You have to find the data to substantiate that. I think it's a good point. But for right now, like if we're looking, you ask about reality. And right now, Black people who graduate from HBCUs do better financially. There was a study from Brookings Institute, a fairly recent one, where they studied this, and they found that students who graduated from HBCUs were more likely to be financially well off, almost double the amount of people who are well off from non-HBCUs. I think it's like 17% of our professional.
I'm gonna need to see that.
I'll put it here. I'm gonna have to put it in the I'll put it in the chat for you.